Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Enterprising Individuals, the Star Trek discussion podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about the series, characters, and stories of the Star Trek universe. I'm your host, Aaron Coker, a.k.a. Caliban, and Deanna Troi said, "I never met a chocolate I didn't like," which gives me hope that in the 24th century they've eliminated greed, poverty, and white chocolate. I'm joined on this episode once again by New York Times and USA Today best-selling author Catherynne M. Valente. Catherynne is the Hugo and Locus Award-winning author of over 24 novels, short stories, and novellas, plus many other works of poetry, nonfiction, and fiction, including her novel Deathless and the Fairyland series of novels. Her most recent novel, Space Opera, was a 2019 Hugo Award-winning nominee for Best Novel, and its sequel, Space Odyssey, will be coming out soon. Catherynne, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
It's great to have you back aboard. Today we'll be talking about The Game, the 6th episode of the 5th season of Star Trek The Next Generation. Wesley Crusher gets a bad rap. Wait, where are you going? Come back. Seriously, where most fans see a simpering nerd, I see a boy with amazing gifts who's being raised with no peer group. Where they see a precocious stripling who saves the day every week, I see a kid who keeps his cool in the midst of certain death in space. Face it, you hate Wesley because you wanted to be Wesley. He's a super genius who gets to hang with the crew of the Enterprise, and yeah, sometimes he nods off, and his nanites get loose and they take over the ship, but how much sleep did you need as a teenager? Wesley is significant in Star Trek because he represents the literal next generation of the Federation, full of promise and poised to exceed the technological and social achievements of those who came before him. If he doesn't get executed for falling into a flower bed, that is. Come on, kid. But we'll talk about that a little later in the show. First, Catherynne, it's great to have you back on the program. And we last spoke in October of 2019, and the world looks significantly stranger now in August of 2020.
Yeah.
A little bit.
It's lots happened.
Yeah. Specifically, just on a worldwide basis, the coronavirus outbreak. How has that affected your work day to day?
I don't know if I mentioned last time that I have a small child.
Yeah.
So, childcare options, and we have 2 adults working from home full time. We normally work from home, but that's a whole different situation when you suddenly have a child who, he's not even 2 years old yet. He can't explain to him what's happening. Yeah. Like there's no way to communicate to him that like, sorry, we can't go to the park ever.
Right. Yeah.
Like I don't know when this is going to be over. Like it's a very difficult age to deal with that, and suddenly every human in his life going away, except his parents. So it's been really difficult. My work schedule has gotten all tangled up, Jeremy Bearimy style, and it's been really crazy. And I also this sort of slate of books that I'm working on right now are supposed to be kind of optimistic.
Okay.
And that's a hard ask at the moment.
Yeah. We could use it though, yeah.
No, and I believe in it. And in many ways, I do think had I finished Space Oddity on time, I would have missed what Space Oddity was clearly destined to deal with, because Eurovision got canceled this year and has never been canceled before in the history of Eurovision, which is what the Space Opera series deals with. Right. It's inspired by Eurovision. So I think that there is a sort of kismet that like there is a thing that this book can do that it wouldn't be able to do otherwise. For people, space opera has always been meant to, lift people up in dark times, and this will be no different. But it's hard for me to pull off because I'm feeling less than glittery these days. But yeah, we're getting through as best we can.
Yeah, I mean, you live on an island. Is there any comfort in that?
Well, there would be, and there kind of was in the winter part, but now it's nice out.
Oh, yeah.
So no one cares. So we are inundated with tourists. I actually can leave the house less now than I could in April, because people are out there not wearing masks. Like they come off the boat and they just take their masks off because it's safe here, obviously.
Right.
And everything's, so cozy and separate from the city. And then the local paper told everyone to come here for their staycations. Yeah. Which, a key part of a staycation is the word stay.
Uh-huh.
And this is not staying. This is where we live. So it's actually right now we all feel a little more confined than we did to begin with, because now it's genuinely not safe.
Yeah.
Because people are just not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But I mean, at least we know how to hunker down in Maine. And on top of all of that, not only did we have our first ever fatal shark attack by a great white shark in this
Yeah.
bay, but we are under tornado warnings tonight. So actual
Oh my God.
Sharknado in real life
Yeah.
happening for us. So
That's wow.
just a lot on top of a lot going on around here. But yeah, unfortunately, the island, because it is an attraction, there's hundreds and thousands of people here every weekend not wearing masks. So now I can never leave my home.
Oh, it's hard to know. It's hard to know what kids will take with them into adulthood and what they sort of remember about childhood. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's a certain generation of kids all over the world who have an aversion to masks or wash their hands a little extra long, as they grow up to be adults. Because it's just so crazy to think about, like all the kids that aren't in school, and hopefully there's some kind of intervention and won't be going to school, at least for this fall. And I wonder what kids will kind of remember about those years of their life.
Yeah, I mean, look, some kid for Christmas this year wished for world peace and school to be canceled, and
won the lottery.
Monkey paw curls down.
Yeah.
So I was talking about this in a class I was teaching, because that's another big. I've been teaching constantly and doing all these online panels and stuff like that, and podcasts. So I was telling one of the classes that I was teaching that, like, I guarantee you there is a certain group of kids that are just the right age who are going to look back on this as the best time of their childhoods, when mom and dad were home all the time, and like we got to play every day, and we got to eat a bunch of junk food and watch a bunch of crappy TV because mom and dad were too tired to say no.
Yeah.
But for them, it will be amazing when they felt really like cozy and taken care of, and mom and dad weren't at work every day. Like, they will remember that. Anybody older than that is going to be very annoyed at this period in history, and rightly so. We're all annoyed.
Yeah.
But it's all in how you look at it. It's all in the perspective. There are certainly moments that we've had as a family that we wouldn't otherwise, and I'm sure we've all learned to bake bread.
Yeah. Right.
We've all learned to do a lot of things that we would know how to do. I personally have enough pasta stacked up in my mud room to last me until the end of time, I think.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's a very strange world that I don't think we ever thought we'd be living in again. I think, then this kind of connects to Star Trek in a way, because I feel like we'd started thinking that we were already kind of in a world where scarcity was not going to be a thing. I mean, obviously, for a lot of us, it still is. The developing world and the global poor, and for a lot of poor in America, which still has a huge poverty and homeless problem. But like the people who run culture don't have a poverty and homeless problem because they make money running culture. And I feel like a lot of social media and the more privileged parts of our society were sort of already thinking as though they lived in Replicatorville and we're never going to have to look for flour again.
Yeah.
And so it was existentially shocking to suddenly not be able to buy butter. Like that's not a thing that anybody expected. That's a story your grandmother tells you. That's not like, the problem is not having money. The problem is not that if you have money there's nothing to buy.
Yeah.
Like that has not been a problem that anybody in America has had for a couple generations. And it's definitely thrown everyone for a loop.
If there's a curio shop up in your neck of the woods where a monkey paw just fell off the shelf, I think. And doubling down on that on a smaller scale, because enough is never enough for 2020, the Hugo Award ceremony was held last weekend as of this taping. And although a panoply of talented and multiracial men and women were honored, many people were dismayed by the ceremony and the seemingly indelible tone of retrograde racism and misogyny that seems baked into the proceedings, which were hosted by George R.R. Martin, no less.
Yeah, so that happened.
Yeah.
That was also shocking, and also just mortifying and embarrassing for the con-com of the convention, and embarrassing for George Martin, and embarrassing for the community, and deeply embarrassing for the nominees. It just didn't have to happen that way. And like some of it is just pure professionalism, like mispronouncing the names of so many
Yeah.
nominees. And I'm not going to say that my name, I've been nominated for the Hugo a lot, and my name's been mispronounced like 50% of the times.
Okay.
So, like, but at the same time, when it's a pre-recorded segment, there's really no excuse for that. You just go
Sure.
back and do another take.
Yeah.
It's not like a live show where you screw up, you screw up. And the pans to John Campbell when when not only have we changed the name of the award, we changed the name of the award to the Astounding Award from the John W.
Right.
Campbell Award, because the woman who won last year, who is an amazing writer, got up, and I was there in person in Ireland, because I was nominated. Got up and gave this astonishing acceptance speech about how John Campbell was a fascist. I mean, you should have seen the room. It blew everyone's hair back. No one was expecting it, and it was amazing. Pointing out the way that this award lionizes someone who's well known for their racism and their sexism and their fascistic tendencies.
Yeah.
And then for George Martin to get up there and just sing his praises for as long as he did, he just went on and on.
So crazy.
And that speech was nominated for and won the Hugo for Best
I
Related.
know. Like, how else?
It's hard not to. George is very beloved.
Oh, sure.
And it's very hard not to see that as a deliberate swipe.
Yeah, especially when they had retro Hugos this year, and if you want to emphasize the contribution of white men, Ted Sturgeon, Cliff Simak, Ray Bradbury, effing Lovecraft, like that was all baked into it anyway. But we had to do this, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I think that part of it is that nobody entirely knows what to do with someone that we all kind of thought of as an ally doing this. Like, there are people, and Robert Silverberg got up and did what Robert Silverberg always does, and nobody's that mad about it because he always does that.
Yeah,
he always gets up and talks about how things were better when he was young, and his friends were better than our friends, and like the writers that he came up with are better than the writers now. That's just what he does. Like, sometimes he says very offensive things, like what he said about N.K. Jemisin, but everyone kind of expects him to be offensive grandpa. Nobody really expects George Martin to get up there and go against the community and the spirit of the community right now the way he did. This is the guy who invented a new award to help people still get acknowledgement during the whole puppies fiasco and everything. It has thrown the Hugo Losers Party, invented the Hugo Losers Party. Like, this is somebody that people really look up to, and so it was very shocking for everyone, and I think everyone's still kind of working their way through it. And a lot of the way people are working through it is that the floodgates have kind of opened, and apparently it's okay to not like a lot of the masters of science fiction now. For a long time, you've really not been allowed to say anything against the sort of panoply of dead old white men. But now we can say, why are we doing the retro Hugos again? Like, what was the what was the specs on that? Like, maybe Heinlein isn't the best of us. And maybe like we could point out a little more that Asimov like harassed women at every convention he ever attended. Like, that these are not gods, and that perhaps work that is just as good is being published now and in the recent past by women and queer writers and writers of color, and that perhaps we don't need to completely worship it, which is a good result from a bad situation.
I guess so. I mean, racism, sexism are being criticized, in every sphere now for good reason. And I think a lot of people, like your average end user or reader of a sci-fi or fantasy book, doesn't realize what a problem it's been institutionally in the sci-fi community for so long. And I know that the Hugos, have been a battleground for that in the last decade or so. I remember on my pop culture podcast, Just Enough Trope, we did a expose of sorts in 2015 on the whole sad puppies garbage of the time. Yeah. And I thought that we did a pretty good job of covering it. And then we interviewed Mary Robinette Cole later that year, and we got a real education on the crap that female and minority science fiction and fantasy writers are putting up with.
Yeah, I mean, it's so I started publishing in 2004, so I've sort of been here for a lot of the sort of dust ups of the last decade and a half,
Yeah.
and there were more dust ups in that decade and a half than probably.
There's ever been.
Well, I don't want to say there's ever been, because there used to be tons of dust ups all the time, but they were on Usenet and they were in the pages of like Locus, and the letters to the editor dust ups just take a lot longer to develop,
Right.
and the Usenet ones were just a smaller group of people. So I think it's just a perfect storm of like Live Journal is kind of where the first one in like the first big one called Race Fail in 2009 happened,
Yeah.
and then moving on to Twitter and all of that. I just think it was a perfect storm of technology and old guard and new guard coming to loggerheads. And old guards and new guards come to loggerheads every decade or so. That is a natural part of the cycle of art, and it is fine.
Yeah.
Fortunately, a lot of the old guard. I don't want to get in trouble, because there's a lot of wonderful people in the old guard, but there are segments of the old guard who have been very hostile to the encroachment of women and LGBTQ and people of color into the not just publishing itself, because we've always been there, but into the sort of halls of the rarefied masters, like the people acknowledging works of true genius by authors of those identities, and them starting to have a much bigger presence in the awards, and so there's been fights about that. God, so much. There's been so much cyber ink spilt on it, and it just comes down to not to crib from an old thing, but we're here, get used to it.
Sure.
We're not going anywhere. We're writing good books, and we're no longer interested in staying quiet and being unacknowledged because there are straight white men in the room who feel like they should be acknowledged first. Like, it's just not how it works anymore. It's not that world. And part of that, I was tweeting about this today, part of that is sort of recognizing that, hey, maybe while people are out there reading the books they like, a lot of what they do like is not going to be stuff that treats marginalized people as props at best and to be eradicated at worst. Like, that's not fun. That's not fun escapism.
No.
And it's not good literature either. And so the stuff that lasts is going to be stuff that doesn't make people feel like they don't belong in the world.
Yeah.
It's 2020. We live in this future now, man. Like, it's just, it doesn't look like Campbell wanted it to look, and that's a good thing. So we're all just trying to get along here and create good art, and it's not actually the women and the queer community and the non-white world that is causing the problems. Actually, we're just doing what we've always done. We're just kind of allowed to do it now.
Yeah, it's 2020, and I'm still having arguments with Star Trek fans about not being political, about diversity and representation. And it's like, what show are you watching? Yeah.
I've never understood conservative Star Trek fans. I don't get it. Like, did we watch
Kylan's right there?
Did you watch it with the sound off?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't get it at all. So yeah, and with Discovery and everything, then there's been a whole new spate of arguments about Star Trek that continue to make no sense at all to me.
Well, you're a Hugo nominee and a Hugo winner yourself for SF Squeakcast, and I'll get in trouble. I don't care. Other than these old diehards just going to their rest, how do you see things getting better in the halls of SFF?
Like anything, the discussions will continue, and there won't be a consensus, because that's not how any of this works. I mean, God, we've been having Worldcons for 75 years, and we still can't agree on what the canon actually is. So it's not going to. There's not going to be some kind of consensus and then everything's fine. But you're going to see the same patterns that you've always seen. There'll be, the old guard and the new guard, and a new guard will come along after all of us now, and we will seem stuck in the past to them, and they will create amazing work, and hopefully we will be more graceful about it than some other folks, but maybe not. Grace is hard to come by.
Yeah.
I think that probably, you know, I don't think that every Hugo nominee for novel is going to be uh, a woman as it was this year forever.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I hope that it will never be as unbalanced in the other direction again. And people will write good books, and hopefully they will get awards, and we don't have to fight about it. But that's probably a utopian vision, because we really love to argue. That's the other problem.
Yeah.
We don't love to argue about stuff that hurts us, but we love to argue just fundamentally.
Yeah.
And Twitter is a terrible platform for arguing, so
Yeah.
that's a mess. So yeah, I don't know. I think a lot probably hinges on how things go in November, as to how the future is going to end up, and who knows when cons will come back, which
Yeah.
is where a lot of this stuff goes down. So I think that really just most people's answer is to hunker down and write the next book and hope for the best. But there's always going to be people who are resistant. There's always going to be people who don't want what you got,
Yeah.
and we've got to find a way to ignore them, I guess, and claim contemporaneity for ourselves, because it is our world, it is our future. It's not the 60s anymore, and we don't have to live in the fantasy of the 60s as far as the future comes. Got to find our own.
Well, here's something that might help. I saw on Twitter that Shannon pitched the idea that you and her should host next year's awards, and I fully throw my support behind that. Heal this world a little bit.
Well, they've already chosen next year's, but hopefully they'll give it to Shannon and I at some point.
Sure.
We're good for it.
Well, let's talk for a bit about your wonderful work. Your writing is extremely original in the way that it combines fantasy and alternate universes with historicity and mythical elements. The last time we talked, I asked if you, when you're engineering a mashup of sorts, if you ever look at what you're working on and go, yeah, that'll do. I think I got enough stuff in there, enough elements. But what I want to ask this time around is when you're constructing something like Deathless, for instance, where you're combining Russian folklore with the Russian Revolution, or like the Prester John series where, you're doing a series about Prester John, of all things. Do you ever think, are people going to get this? Is this too unconventional?
Well, it's funny you'd bring up Prester John with that, because I absolutely thought that. I was like, nobody knows what this is.
No, you could tell people that you just made it up, and nobody knows the myth of Prester John.
Most of them would believe it. So my solution to this was that, and you can still find it on YouTube. I got out a bunch of my old action figures, and I did a YouTube video explaining the history of Prester John with like Spider-Man and Venom as like the spirit of Christ and the body of Christ, and like explaining Nestorianism and the like different sects of Christianity before the Nicene Revolution and everything. Like all this very obscure medievalist stuff with memes and action figures. And by the number of views on YouTube, I will say I have now taught more people about Prester John than I would have if I had finished my PhD and become a professor, which was my original intent. So I'm fairly proud of that. So that I felt like Prester John is is a thing that people don't know is real.
Yeah.
And that's something I couldn't communicate in the pages of fiction. I couldn't be like, oh, BT dubs.
Right. Yeah.
This is real.
Author's note.
I had to do something outside the book for that. But with Deathless, people are aware that Russia is a real country.
Yeah.
They had a revolution, that World War II is a thing. So like there were certain big things I could sort of count on an American audience knowing, but there was a lot I couldn't.
Yeah.
Most Americans don't know very much about Russian culture. Actually, they know a lot of stereotypes. They don't know a lot about Russian food. They don't know a lot about Russian history. And most of them find Russian names confusing. So I had a lot on my plate for Deathless. And I did whenever I wrote about Japan as well, where I used to live. Because I just had to communicate to a Western audience all of the culture that went into this, as well as the story itself. But to be perfectly honest, that is how you write science fiction and fantasy anyway. Yeah. You're always having to world build. You are always having to communicate what the language of your world is, and the food of your world, and the culture of it, and the history of it. And so just keeping in mind that you do still have to do that with a real culture from planet Earth, when you can't count on your audience knowing as much as you know
Yeah.
is pretty much the trick. There is a part of Deathless toward the end where I kind of gave up on whether on hoping people knew things. It was kind of if you know this section is the coolest part of the book. If you don't, I'm sorry, it's just pretty, and you'll have to deal with it.
Okay.
But there's a whole scene in a village called Yaichka, and it's basically like the whole of Russian history played out as a small village in the mountains. And if you know the movers and shakers of the revolution and the war and everything, then this is extremely deep for you. But if you don't, it's kind of odd, but it still fits with the story. And that's the balance I had to strike there. That if you don't know, it's still a good part of the story. But I was kind of surprised how many people like didn't know Lenin's first name.
Okay, sure.
I kind of thought people knew Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. I guess that was. You make assumptions and sometimes they turn out to be wrong. I had one of my beta readers for the book at one point was like, I have no idea what the significance of the year 1917 is.
Okay.
I was like, oh,
well,
all right. Well, okay, sure. I'll fix that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's good to have beta readers who don't know about what you're writing about, so they can be like, I don't. This lost me.
Yeah.
So I think about that all the time. I really do. And I'm always trying to write books that are entertaining even if you know nothing. Even when it comes to something like space opera, that is intended to be read if you have never heard the word Eurovision in your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you've never heard the word Eurovision, then the sections of the book correspond to the parts of Captain Planet, or they're just elements and heart. If you do know Eurovision, you know that is the Eurovision drinking game. It is the most traditional one that you drink whenever your element comes on stage.
Yeah, right.
If your element is heart, it's whenever love is, the word love or a physical heart, is on. And yes, all of the chapter titles are Eurovision songs, but if you don't know that, then they just seem like cool idiosyncratic phrases. So all of it, everything is meant to be read on two levels. Like if you can smell what I'm cooking, then you get all the little Easter eggs. And if you don't, it's still a funny, good, vivid story. And maybe you think I'm smarter than I am because you think I made all that stuff up.
Well, I like that you have the little animal farm village where everything's just sort of playing out in metaphor. I was going to ask you about Picard, but I'd rather ask you about the Will Ferrell movie Eurovision Song Contest Story of Fire Saga. It's so for somebody like me who I guess was, got my education about Eurovision last year talking to you, and then in between then and now this movie comes out, I'm like, oh my God.
Well, I wanted to hate it. Like I really did.
Yeah.
But Will Ferrell, I think he loves Eurovision so much he forgot to shit all over it, like he usually does, which makes a movie like this.
Yeah.
Like it's so pure and innocent, and it really genuinely is good, and the music is genuinely good. Like there's some complaints I could make, but to be perfectly honest, like it's really just a fun movie, and it feels nice. And since there wasn't a 2020 Eurovision, it was nice to watch one.
Yeah, that's so weird. Yeah, it's another one of those things.
I feel like it was made for me in such a weird way. Like even Eurovision, it takes place in Edinburgh in the movie, which will never happen. The UK would have to win for one thing, and that's not happening. And for another thing, I don't think the UK would hold it in Edinburgh at this point if they did win. So there's a fan canon going around, which is that Scotland separated from the UK because of Brexit, and then Scotland won. Which I completely
that would totally happen. Yeah,
that would happen. But I went to college in Edinburgh, so I was like freaking out when they're driving around the city, being like, look at this city, it's this church. It's like I really, even that was so delightful to me. And there's a billion cameos, and I mean, I'm not sure I know who that movie is for, other than fans of Eurovision.
I don't know.
I'm not really. I'm like, there's so much in it, like that whole song along thing. Like, if you don't know those people are Eurovision singers, I don't know if that scene even makes sense to you. But it's. I thought it was very sweet. I really like the song at the end, Husavik, and I mean, my kid loves Ya Ya Ding Dong, and will yell at Alexa to play Ding Dong. I really enjoyed it. I really did.
That's awesome. Well, we got to keep rolling here. Why did you choose this specific episode, The Game, to discuss today?
So, funny story.
Uh-huh.
I have many brothers, and one of them I mentioned on the previous podcast, but my other brother had a sad because he's the one who's watched Star Trek with me our whole lives, and he didn't get mentioned on the podcast.
Oh no!
And I was like, I'm so sorry. I know you and I are Star Trek friends, but it just happened that way.
Sure.
And so I said, why don't you pick the episode that I'll do for the next one? So this one goes out to my brother Nick,
All right.
who would also like to point out that in Star Trek VI, when people complain about the uniforms mismatching, he is in the military, and he would like me to tell everyone that that happens all the time in the military,
Okay.
and it's actually not a nitpick. It is a totally realistic, one of the more realistic military things Star Trek has pulled off.
I'm concerned about how there's just so much wool involved in the construction of all the uniforms. The big, bulky maroon jackets, and then it looks like it's a very thick fiber that the TNG jumpsuits are wearing. Everybody would be sweating constantly. Nothing breathes.
It looks so hot.
Yeah.
It looked uncomfortable all the time. Like, even aside from, and we will get into what the kids are wearing in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone looks uncomfortable, and it shouldn't, because they're essentially sweatpants and a sweatshirt, but
Yeah.
it somehow still looks uncomfortable.
Yeah, those big Coogee sweaters, yeah. I'll confess with no trepidation that I really liked Wesley Crusher as a kid when I was watching the show. And it wasn't it wasn't until later that I was instructed that I was supposed to hate him. And I know that he, I guess for some fans, like gums up the works of this cool power fantasy of the future that people see Trek as. But I liked how smart and generally noble he was. And I read an opinion piece somewhere that made the point that he was really instrumental in the show's broad appeal. You've got the adults who are the TOS fans tuning in when TNG starts, but you've got a whole new generation of fans who need a touchstone character to fixate on, while mom and dad are watching this new Trek show. And I think that, with the number of people I've talked to who say that their love of Trek began in some part with their parents, you included, I'd say it worked. I wouldn't say he's a perfect character. He has problems, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, so how old were you when you were watching Star Trek Next Gen, though?
Was it 86, 87? I was 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah, see, I was a kid.
Yeah.
So, of course, I didn't have a problem with Wesley, and I wasn't annoyed by a kid saving the day, because I was a kid. So that was my fantasy, that I would be able to save the day, and that even though the adults didn't listen to me, I would still be right. Like, that's the ultimate.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's like how YA works as a genre.
Yeah.
So I had the biggest crush on Wesley, and like I thought he was totally awesome, and never questioned that his place in the show at all until I was much older and found out that everyone hated Wesley.
Yeah, right.
So I liked him a lot. I never had any real issue with him. I wonder if I would have liked the show as much at that time in my life if it had just been all adults led by a bald guy. Like, would I have liked that show as much? I don't know. I don't know
either.
I'm sure I would have when I was a teenager in my 20s, when it was rebroadcasting on every station all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I would have liked it as much, when I was 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
So yeah, I never had an issue with Wesley. And it's funny, I didn't really think about that. We did a Wesley episode last time, too.
Yeah, we did. And we'll talk about that, too. But right now we're talking about the TNG episode, The Game. It's the 6th episode of the 5th season of Star Trek The Next Generation. It first aired on October 28th of 1991. The teleplay for this episode is by Brannon Braga, who we definitely know. This was his first script, however, for Trek, after being a writing intern for the 4th season of TNG. The story of the episode is by Braga and Susan Sackett and Fred Bronson. And let's talk about the people who pitched the story of this episode. Sackett was a production associate on TNG TNG, and she was Gene Roddenberry's personal assistant during the filming of the first 5 Trek films. She worked with Roddenberry for 17 years until his death in 1991. She also wrote a number of books about the making of Star Trek the Motion Picture, as well as other show business topics. She co-wrote the episodes The Game and the 3rd season episode Menage a Troy with her writing partner, Fred Bronson. Bronson worked as a publicist for NBC in the 70s and early 80s, handling publicity for shows like Buck Rogers, The Bionic Woman, and Hollywood Squares. Bronson introduced Sackett to Gene Roddenberry in 1974, and he wrote the series finale of the Star Trek animated series, The Counterclock Incident. He also had a weekly column in Billboard magazine and has written for various music award shows, and get this, he was a member of the jury at Melodifestivalen 2009. Yes, a pre-selection event to choose Sweden's representative to the 2009 Eurovision Song Contest.
That's what a nerd I am. You say that. I knew what it was.
You knew what it was right away. So the episode was directed by Corey Allen. Allen got his start as an actor playing Buzz Gunderson in Rebel Without a Cause, but soon moved into directing theater and later television, which he would do continually until his death in 2010. Allen directed 4 episodes of DS9 and 5 of TNG, including the series premiere Encounter at Farpoint. The start date for this episode is 45208.2, and your assignment, Catherine, if you can, is to give us a 25-word synopsis of The Game.
I can do it in much less than that.
Sure.
Video games are bad.
Yeah, that's it's so weird. Well, we'll talk about this in a bit, but it's so weird to think that this, people still hated video games. I think that's kind of dead now, but yeah.
The slightly longer version is that Riker brings back an addictive video game, and it turns out to be a mind control device, and then Wesley and a one-off girlfriend have to save the day. Like, that's the episode. It is an iconic episode.
Yeah,
This is not one of the forgettable ones. Like, when my brother suggested this, I was like, yeah, we'll do that one. That's fine. I remember most of that episode without even having to rewatch it. It definitely is one of those that everybody remembers.
Yeah, and I think I must have had this, back in the day, you've got like 2 VHS tapes that you record TV onto and watch them over and over. And so I must have had this one at some point on VHS because I remember this really well. As I was watching this, I was like, I don't think I have to watch this. I remember the whole thing.
Yeah.
Here's some facts from our memory banks about this episode. The episode's co-writer Bronson said that the idea for the episode came from the fact that whenever he wanted a distraction from work, he would boot up Tetris on his computer, and he found it very addictive, totally relatable. This episode was kicked around for a while before it finally reached the screen. It was pitched by Sackett and Bronson for the 4th season, with many writers attempting subsequent drafts of the story. It was eventually given to incoming writer Brannon Braga for his first script. Braga decided to take the story in a darker direction, unconsciously basing the concept of his draft on the film Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And editor's note, I don't want to plug myself too much on this, but on my other Star Trek podcast called Backtrekking, we look at the inspirations behind classic episodes of Trek, and my co-host and I compare The Game and Philip Kaufman's excellent 1978 remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You can check that out at Backtrekking on Twitter. Braga also modeled the plot of the episode on the then popular concern that children were becoming addicted to home console video games, though he notes the ironic twist of all the adults becoming addicted in the episode. He also set out to make Wesley Crusher a little hipper, his words, by depicting him as a more relaxed and self-possessed academy student. And for kids today, and by kids I mean, young adults, they might not even remember that just maybe 10 or less years ago, we were still trying to, pin things on video games, pin violence, horrible school shootings and things like that. And our president, our commander-in-chief, tried that last year, trying to blame a series of shootings on violent video games. But at that point, it was like, yeah, get a new take. It's played out.
Yeah.
Like, they've just become such a big part of our society that this kind of, scare story about video games being bad for you doesn't quite translate to today.
But, I mean, the hilarious thing about it is that, like, as a game, this game clearly sucks.
No, this is a terrible game. Yeah.
No, it is Candy Crush in space. And that is actually kind of prescient that, like, all the moms and dads were the ones who are addicted to it rather than the kids. Yeah. Which is not to say kids aren't addicted to. Now we're just like, yeah, we're all addicted to games. It's fine. But the game itself is not violent at all. And in fact, they were still trying to make this argument about how, video games are violent when video games were just like the worst graphics ever, and virtually, just pixels bouncing off a screen. They probably said it about Pong.
Yeah, Pong is corrupting our children. I could totally see that happening.
I guarantee you I could find an article where someone had terrible satanic warnings about Pong.
Yeah, like a chick track about what Pong is doing to your kids. In this episode, when Data is deactivated by Dr. Crusher and falls onto the bio bed, actor Brent Spiner actually hit the bed so hard that he cut his chin. He had to be taken to the hospital. Upon returning to the set, the director immediately asked him for another take of the scene. Wesley appears in his cadet uniform in this episode, which he'd wear in appearances until his departure from Starfleet and the series in the 7th season episode Journey's End, which was also directed by Alan. And this was the first episode of the series where a matte painting was used to visually extend the Jeffries tube. It's a technique that would be adopted for many future Trek series, a lot of those on DS9. This is the first time that Molly, the O'Brien's daughter, is named on screen. Hana Hate would not appear as Molly on the show until next season in the episode Rascals. And this was the first episode of The Next Generation to air after Gene Roddenberry's death on October 24th in 1991. Let's talk about the guest stars for the episode. The major one is, of course, Ashley Judd, who appears as Robin Lefler. This was the second and last appearance of Robin Lefler. Judd is the daughter of Naomi Judd, who, along with Ashley's half-sister Winona, make up the country-western duo, the Judds. Judd went on from Trek to movie stardom, having appeared in many films, and she's currently in pre-production on the film Anita, where she will play Anita Bryant, the beauty queen and singer who became an anti-LGBTQ rights activist. And I think we're probably going to take that one from the opposite angle, like a satire, I'm guessing.
God, I hope so. I don't understand
She was the orange juice
why
queen, yeah.
But why are we doing this with, like, the Phyllis Schlafly thing? Like, come on. I don't understand why we need to make these about those terrible people. Why can't we tell the story of that era without centering? Yeah,
something like Bombshell kind of rides that line, because I don't like any of those people, but some of them were victims, and we're kind of telling their story too. But I'm wondering how they're going to make this. I still want to see it.
I don't know. The last thing I want to do with my evening is, like, spend some time with Phyllis goddamn Schlafly. So I don't care how great Cate Blanchett is. I'm not watching that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what this new trend is, but
I
don't like it.
Vice. I guess these are all Adam McKay movies, but Dick Cheney's a terrible person, but maybe you should sympathize a little with him. Good. Wasn't he kind of cool?
But have you seen Vice?
Yeah.
It's Vice was really good, actually.
Yeah, the worst parts are the overtly political parts, which is weird to say. But yeah, it is a fascinating look really at him and great performances. Fun fact, Judd is an outspoken activist for humanitarian and civil rights and causes, and in 2014, she considered running against Mitch McConnell of Kentucky for his Senate seat, but ultimately decided against it. And this is all pre-Me Too, so I wish that she'd done that.
Yeah, I do too.
Catherine Moffat appears as Itana Joel in the episode. Moffat would go on to play the role of Vatrik Palra in the DS9 episode Necessary Evil. She made many appearances on TV since her 1977 debut. She provided the voice of the Scarlet Witch in the 90s Iron Man cartoon series, and she also appeared in the film Spy Hard, and she retired from acting in 1998. And of course, Will Wheaton appears in this episode as Wesley Crusher. We've never really talked about Will Wheaton in detail on this show. So let's give a couple facts about him. He got his start very early in acting, appearing in TV shows and films starting in 1981. His breakout role was, of course, the 1986 Rob Reiner film Stand By Me. He played the role of Geordie LaChance. He landed Next Gen almost immediately after Stand By Me. Somebody I interviewed previously made the point that, forget Patrick Stewart, LeVar Burton and Will Wheaton were TNG's big gets in the mid-'80s. The kid from Stand By Me, and the kid from Reading Rainbow.
That's why I wanted to, I remember being like, oh my God, the guy from Reading Rainbow is going to be on Star Trek.
Yeah.
Must-see TV.
Check that out.
I don't know what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah, right.
Child,
he's got some cool glasses.
And sit on one of the consoles and read us a book.
Yeah, don't take his word for it. The Romulans are here. Yeah. He would go on to roles in film and TV to this day, becoming an incredibly prolific voice actor for animation and video games. He's also made many appearances as himself on The Big Bang Theory during its 12-season run. He's the executive producer and host of Tabletop, a show where he and guests play tabletop games, and he's become a geek icon and general ambassador for the geek community. Not too shabby for a troublesome little man-child in a lousy sweater. Well, it occurred to me when I was preparing for this episode, we talked a little bit about Wesley as a character last time that you were on, and his perception in fandom as a Mary Sue type character. And it doesn't really help that Gene Roddenberry's middle name is Wesley. And Roddenberry has said in interviews that Wesley is modeled after himself at the age of 14. So whatever you think of him, he is kind of an author insert character in this case.
Yeah. No, I think Mary Sue is probably fair.
Yeah, and you know,
that doesn't mean a Mary Sue can't be enjoyable.
Oh, absolutely. And the term, of course, comes from a fanfic by Trek fan Paula Smith, who was trying to lampoon what she saw as bad characterization in other fanfics at the time. And I was thinking, like, is author insertion all that great of a sin? I was trying to think of examples of, like, positive, good author insertion or author avatars in other stories.
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that much of a sin. And it depends on how loosely you define author insertion, because, of course, it's a... I mean, I want to say postmodern, but it's not even just postmodern. You know, to use the author as a character in one's own work is popular in postmodernism, but Chaucer did it.
Yeah.
And so did Cervantes. Like, there's a lot of writers who have appeared in their own works as themselves. So is it fancy if you use your own name, but not fancy if you don't? Like, yeah. I'm not sure. So, and I think that a lot of, you know, the protagonists of fantasy and science fiction books take a lot from their authors. There is a certain, you know, element of the fantasy of being at the center of this story, and you know, a lot of people do just put themselves in it. You know. So I don't necessarily think it's a terrible thing. You know, a lot of my protagonists have black hair. I just think black hair is really pretty, but sure. You know, like
yes, and studied the classics. Bourget put himself in a lot of his stories, and I think I think he did it because a lot of the thing he wasn't. I don't think people would try to wedge him into like sci-fi, maybe fantasy, but a lot of the concepts that he was trying to talk about were so weird and so ungrounded that. I think maybe he just thought, I'll just make it me. Like, I met a guy one day, and he told me about this thing that you could see everywhere on Earth or whatever. And so it sort of grounds it. And like Vonnegut, you know, has Kilgore Trout or whatever.
Sure.
But yeah, if it's not commentary, it could be, like you mentioned. I think Gene just wanted to be in this world. Like, I think he just wanted to make sure he was on the Enterprise.
Well, I mean, I can tell you that Borges came from a tradition. Along with Marquez, invented the tradition of magical realism, which had as its sort of organizing principle to treat the unusual events with journalistic style. So that inserting of himself is part of, you know, of journalism. You know, the journalist is part of journalism, the person interviewing, the person embedded, and all of that. So I think that came from that same inspiration of journalistic treatment of unusual, if not fantastical, subjects.
Yeah, totally fantastical. Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I think this is actually. I mean, he hasn't been in the show for a bit before this. So is this one of the more Mary Sue episodes? I think you could argue that Robin Lefler in this episode is more of the Mary Sue than Wesley is.
Yeah.
But in that she is practically perfect in every way, awesomely. But I love Robin, and I think I've heard a lot of people say over the years, like, oh, it would have been cool if she had been a more permanent character.
Yeah.
So I think that she's a great example of a so overly perfect character that is still effective and likable.
Yeah, and I don't want to reduce her to like girl Wesley, but I think that they have a lot of similarities. And you know, originally when the show was being developed, Bob Justman, the supervising producer, had convinced Gene for a time that Wesley should be a girl, be Wesley Crusher, which that eventually got changed back, but that could have been interesting. No less than publishing giant and periodical of record Maxim Magazine held a poll of the worst sci-fi characters, and Wesley came in second only to Jar Jar.
Oh, that's not
Consider
nice.
the readership of the source, I guess. But so, you know, he's up there. And And I don't, like what I said before, I do think it's unjustified, but numbers don't lie. In researching for this episode, I found an interesting phenomena, and thank you to the blog Datascope Analytics for this information. But the presence of Wesley in an episode has a statistical impact on the IMDb ratings of that particular TNG episode. Specifically, the median IMDb rating of episodes without Wesley is 7.4. And when Wesley is, 7.5. And when Wesley is in an episode, it's 6.95. So, if you put any faith in IMDb ratings, but he sort of pulls it down, and then it goes on from there. When Wesley talks in an episode, the ratings get successively lower, and the more he talks, the lower the ratings get, going down to like the mid, sixes. But it's funny because this episode is the one that features Wesley's the most amount of lines. He has like 114 lines in this episode. So this is like the Wesley Crusher episode. And it's got a rating of 7.4, which is right on the median for all the episodes together. So it's like if you push hard enough, people like Wesley. Or it's like if you do a joke over and over again, then it's not funny, and then it's really not funny, and it kind of comes back around. Maybe it's the capability of Wesley in this episode that people responded to.
Well, and he's a little older,
Yeah.
He's not quite as much of the punk kid, and he's been to Starfleet Academy, so you can kind of buy that he's had a training montage or something.
Yeah.
And I think, when he's been gone for a while, you feel a little better about seeing him again.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, hey, buddy. And, it is just, I'm going to make fun of this episode a lot, but it is a good episode. Like, it's not something that we've really seen very much of. We don't see anybody play video games in the future, except for this episode. Yeah. And that's not realistic at all. We see the weird martial arts on the holodeck stuff, which is always very strange and awkward.
I can imagine that the holodeck might supersede like handheld video games, or 2D video games, but they're all gamers. They're all like LARPing on the holodeck.
And they all have to schedule time on the holodeck.
Yeah,
so
right.
Like there's, you would definitely have a headset in your room. That would 100% be a thing this far in the future.
Sure, yeah.
And I've written quite a bit actually about the sort of painful dorkiness of everybody in Star Trek. That their hobbies are LARPing on tall ships and pretending they're Horatio Hornblower and things like that.
Yeah.
No one is cool in Star Trek at all. And like one of the things about it is that there is no trashy entertainment. So this is like the only trashy entertainment you see in Star Trek, really, until we get to Quark. And even Quark, it's sort of hand waved away. Yeah. So I think this episode is just a really good and fast-paced episode anyway, so you don't necessarily mind. And I kind of find it is just a little realistic. At first, I was like, would the teenagers really be the only ones who aren't playing the video game? But actually, if your mom is the one who's playing it first, you're not touching that. Gross. Not cool at all. And like if we see everyone's O face in this episode.
Yeah, we begin on Riker's O face.
It's so painful for these teenagers just to have to watch a bunch of adults going around in like various states of gasm.
Yeah,
like I can actually entirely buy that they would be not into it at all, and so that they're the ones that save the day kind of works.
Yeah, I love the fact that halfway through the episode, Crusher comes to her quarters, to like just force the game on Wesley, and she's like, "What is that?" Oh, thank God, my son and his girlfriend are making sex noises on a bed. I thought maybe they'd be doing something else. You're a gamer, so I know you have a perspective on this, and you mentioned before this is a crappy game, but
this game sucks.
Every time you score, you get heroin, a little hit of heroin, I guess. So that has some merit, but I would think that the Federation citizens. And I loved your point about the fact that this is the first quote unquote, sort of lowbrow entertainment we see in their universe. But I think they'd have the self-possession to know that they're being drugged by a game, or you can imagine in their accepting universe, they've got recreational drugs, and pastimes that require some prudence in indulging. We see people like Barclay, who's a rarity. He has a problem with, the holodeck and overusing it, but you'd think that, and I know there's like mind controlled rays or whatever in the thing as well, but the second that you put on this game and you're not on Ryza, you're in a uniform and you're like, "Ooh, I'm gonna save this for later. I'm gonna put this under my pillow and I'm gonna play this later." But immediately everybody is sort of sucked into this thing.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about how this actually works.
Yeah, sometimes they're like suspicious and they're acting all creepy, and other times they're really open about, "Hey, just try this game; it's fun." Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get to that when we get to that part of the episode, because I have a lot of questions about this device, but especially because it's kind of inconsistent. They must get like version 2.0 later on, because in the beginning people are still kind of functional.
Yeah.
At the first couple of levels, and then by the end, the minute you put it on, you're gone. So I don't know. Does the Federation have this kind of do Federation citizens have enough self-control to not play heroin wars or angry heroin? But I don't know. I guess it depends. We've never really gotten into how much recreational drugs are approved of or available. You would think that they would be replicatable anyway.
Yeah, like if they have synthahol, they could have heroin that doesn't that gives you a little shot, but it doesn't. It's not addictive or something.
Yeah,
like
I don't know. I mean, Beverly is all in right away, and if Picard's all in, that's one of my major questions. How did they get Picard to play a video game?
Yeah, how'd they get Worf to do it?
I mean, did they? So you could sort of fan wave it by saying they forced them like they do with Wesley at the end.
But how'd they hold Worf down?
I actually prefer to imagine them trying to sell Jean-Luc Picard on playing a shitty video game.
Right.
Like, come on, it's Candy Crush, it's fine, Bejeweled. Like, I really just prefer to imagine what that scene would have been like.
Yeah. I maybe they can, like you said, when there's a 2.0, they can upgrade like the graphics or what the game is about. So like Worf is like putting severed heads, in abysses or something like that.
Worf's easy. You just tell him it's an ancient Klingon warrior game, and he'll play it.
Or like Troy's is a chocolate cookie clicker or something like that. She does that.
I mean, actually, I would think that if you were remaking this episode now, you might do it that way, where the game is, whatever would appeal to each person. Sure. But like, I don't think they could even imagine coding that many versions of a game or an adaptable game that way.
Yeah.
Back in 1991.
They must have put together like a virtual console version for Geordi's visor, because his eyes don't work. Like you can literally.
How does that not come up?
Yeah, I don't know.
In this episode, how does it not come up? You cannot see how emphatically I am gesticulating right now. Like, how
I can hear it
not come up that this is a thing that goes directly into your eyeballs, and Geordi's into it, but his eyeballs don't work.
Yeah,
like that. How is that not? You've got to get rid of Geordi the same way you get rid of Data.
Right?
Beginning.
Yeah, you just knock him out, or you lock him in a cupboard or something.
But if we're gonna start getting into it, start from the beginning. This is another episode where Riker's dick ruins things for everyone.
Riker brought something back from Ryza as something they've heard before. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like we're forced to suffer through yet another scene of Riker's game with the ladies, which
weird.
He has none.
Yeah, I mean, we open on a hotel room in Sedona, and like. I don't want to yuck anybody's yum, but this is not how I imagined Riker's game to work.
Cool. It's awful. And then, he is just completely not suspicious of anything. Like, how many problems have we had with Ryza in the past? Because it's a lot.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll put a completely mysterious headset on my head. Like, that seems fine.
Yeah.
That's a normal sex thing that, like, sexful people do sexfully after sex on Ryza. Sure. Like, no, this is weird. And, like, Riker is not suspicious at all because he does not think when on Ryza.
Yeah.
And then, like, so he comes back, and they immediately have to make a bunch more of them. And this is where one of my questions about this game comes in. How does the replicator happy to make this game, happy to make hundreds of this, and it doesn't like ping Picard's desktop and be like, I'm making a bad. You should do something about the brainwashing machine that I have been asked to make. Like the replicator has no problem, bad chips and all, making hundreds of this thing.
I guess if you get the XO, he gets the same notification, so he can turn it off or something like that. He's got the codes to make this work.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, so he comes back and he's like, I got, yeah, exactly like you say. I brought something back from Riza. Everyone needs to try it. And nobody's like, I don't want your gross like swinger game. I don't like
Right. Yeah.
ew.
Yeah.
Everyone's just all in. Um and then there's this whole weird scene with Troy where
Oh
like she
boy.
has more to say about chocolate than
Yes.
she has had to say in several episodes about anything.
Yes.
And I feel like they wanted to make some kind of addiction parallel,
Or some
but
kind of like like some kind of
pleasure, like hedonism,
sensuality. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But it just comes off weird, and I feel like Marina Sirtis probably hated every word she had to say about chocolate on that show because
Probably.
it's so infantilizing, and Robin Lefler really shows what female characters could have been like on the show if they had taken them
Yes.
seriously and not had to
Yes.
sexualize them every second of every day.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad that both those things happen in the same episode.
Eating her chocolate ice
Yeah.
cream with fudge and chocolate chips and a
And
side
like
of
she has
cacao
an
beans.
entire monologue in
Yeah.
a 42-minute episode about how to eat. Like, we know how to eat chocolate, man. We know how to eat a sundae. You don't have to get into it. We don't. This is science fiction, but we don't need that level of exposition.
It does plant the flag as I think this might be like the horniest episode of Star Trek.
Oh God, it's a very horny episode, and like before Beverly's Scottish Space Ghost episode, it is easily like the most uncomfortable we can be around Beverly and all of the adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like watching this as a child, like it'll put you off sex for a while.
Yeah, the Beverly one is horny. I think I read, don't quote me on this, but that's also kind of a metaphor for addiction, sort of diving into something, and being isolated. But yeah, I think this one tops it in terms of, except for the general low level horniness that was all over Enterprise. This is definitely extremely horny.
Oh yeah, and and the funny thing is, so I was talking about how everyone's a painful dork. They're all super painful dorks at Wesley's welcome home party. Like,
yeah,
like, hey, Latin, buddy.
Yeah.
And Worf's like, I made you a cake.
Yeah, are they already pod people at this point? Like, what?
It's so weird, and like, oh God, and then they're just like, oh, I know you're on vacation, but let's do work.
Yeah, they immediately put him to work. It makes sense. Like, he's a cadet, but
yes, it doesn't sound like it's an urgent thing at all either. It's just like, go do your chores.
Yeah, right.
Like I guess when everyone comes home from college, you still like you need to pick up around the house and help.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, come out to the garage with me. Yeah,
kind.
Yeah.
That like the first thing they say to him is like, you need to go help out in engineering. Like, thanks, Dad. But
I thought maybe they were writing Data. Data's fake laughter is the best moment in the episode. I thought that they were maybe writing Data like a little extra awkward to juxtapose that with how much more self-possessed Wesley is now. Because Data immediately starts talking about his years in the academy, which I'm trying to imagine Data in the academy, but were apparently very hard. And Geordi's like, oh yeah, you gotta get him back with the good. You gotta have some kind of liquid spray out of some kind of device. That's a theme at the academy for our pranks. And so he kind of he feels like more of an equal to Data in those scenes to me.
Yeah, it definitely, there's a strong contrast. And in that party scene, like Wesley seems like the only relaxed person.
Yeah.
And this is after Riker is into the game.
Right.
Like,
right.
He's got a little heroin in him, and he is still not nearly as chill as Wesley. And I think you're right. That's part of why Wesley is cool in this episode.
Should be Lou Reed in that scene. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody else is just either a stiff dork or just wait. You don't want to walk into a room because it's just sploosh everywhere.
Yeah.
Like this is. Nobody wants to be around any adult in this episode.
Yeah, and of course, it's the nerds that save the day, and I love the fact that they're gonna, hook it up to the computer before they put it on, and of course, discover the evil secret of it.
Yeah, and I feel like there must have been a draft of this where the romantic connection between Robin and Wesley is more than just like, oh, I guess they banged at the end, because they bring up the Sadie Hawkins dance, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which really, do you really think they still have Sadie Hawkins dances in the future? Do you think like gender equality is a little more
I don't
on the
know.
up and up in that. I mean, I feel like a lot of people today don't know what a Sadie Hawkins dance is.
Yeah, it's traditions die hard, especially in the military, but it is really stretching credulity to think that they would still do that.
But I feel like there must have been a draft where Wesley felt awkward around girls, and that's why Sadie Hawkins came up, and the game like offered a way to not be. Because otherwise, why are you talking about it? Why are we talking about Sadie Hawkins? It's weird.
There's kind of thrry hits in this because it's kind of an anti-video game thing, it's kind of an anti-drug thing, and it's kind of an anti-sex thing. Yeah.
Yep. That's because everyone's a dork in the future. And like, stay dorky, stay alive. Yeah. Well, true. But I mean, the number of times, it's mostly Riker and Troy, let's be honest, but the number of times having sex with somebody you shouldn't have gets the entire ship in trouble.
Yeah.
Is very high.
Yeah.
Although it seems not often consensual with Troy, which is a whole other podcast, I think.
Oh, yeah, that is.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll move past that. It's just a huge bummer.
The biggest complaints that I hear about this episode generally, whether they're in good faith or not, is that it's weird that these adults would get addicted to this. And I'm like, this is sci-fi, you know what I mean? Like, all kinds of things can happen on a weekly show. But it is a little weird that they do a pretty good job of showing that Geordi is getting a little stressed out because of all these experiments they have to do in the cluster. And we have like one or two hits at him, little bits where it's like, try this. Nah, I'm too busy right now. And Riker finally gets him to a point after Data has been like incapacitated, which is like, hey, your friend's dead. Play this game. You'll feel better. Like, I like that they kind of force him into doing it sort of organically because he's stressed out, but there isn't any really good time to suggest it to him if he's really stressed out.
Yeah, and they get rid of Data immediately.
Yeah.
Which everyone trying to take over the Enterprise should do.
That off switch, they set it up in the first season and it pays dividends. I can't believe
this is the episode they pay off the off switch on. Like, for such a minor episode, this is the moment where they're like, oh yeah, we'll use that obvious thing.
Just glue it up so you can never use it again. Like, I don't understand.
Or, I don't want to get too blue
put
for
tape over
this podcast, but like, you don't have to put it on his neck. You could put it somewhere less accessible. So you got to really want to turn Data off.
Now I'm trying to guess where it's going to be. Yeah.
But yeah, I can't believe this is for this plot.
Yeah.
Someone's finally smart enough to turn Data off. But yeah, and so we have this whole kind of early part of the episode where we see the like headsets start to proliferate, and we spend that time sort of investing in Wesley and Robin's relationship, which involves some kind of date-like thing where she rolls up in orange leather and he rolls up in a couch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it is it's not a classic Wesley sweater, but it's something heavily upholstered.
Yeah.
Shoulder pads, and hers is like tight orange leather. Cool. Her outfit's super 90s though.
Yeah, it's like late 80s, early 90s Cher or something like that.
This whole jumpsuit thing. Again, they're the ones acting like adults, where like this druggie comes up to their table and like knocking things over, like, "Hey man, you want to hit?" It's basically a Dare video.
Yeah, right.
And it kind of goes on like that in this very after school special. This is how drugs take over your school.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And like any after school special, it kind of has to end as soon as the Helen Hunt jumps out of the window or whatever. It's like there is no place to go. So everybody just goes back to their jobs. Nobody gets in trouble.
And like, we never see, kind of interestingly, we never see the ship listing or anything.
Yeah.
Like, they're never out of it enough that they're not doing their jobs, or we would be in serious trouble. And later on in the episode, everyone seems completely compos mentis, except that they are willing to do whatever this Catarian woman says.
Yeah.
But they're not zombies at all. They are having conversations back and forth with her. So again, how does this work? How does this brainwashing work?
It's comprehensive. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a very thorough brainwashing job. But yeah, before all that happens, the main the main danger seems to be that everyone is playing the game all the time.
Mhm.
And I gotta say, we spent some time talking about the quarantine. Everyone's playing Animal Crossing all the time, and you don't even get a heroin hit from that, and it seems all right. So
Yeah, play
really,
play this game. You start in debt when it begins. Yeah.
yeah, but it's not like this game isn't even multiplayer. Like you, I do think on the Enterprise, like a game like Animal Crossing would be crazy popular. Like, come over to my island, but like I want to actually deal with you in my quarters. That's like I've been working all day. I don't care.
Right.
But I think that like a multiplayer game like that would be very popular in Star Trek. But this isn't even multiplayer. It's just it doesn't even have any skill to it. They say later on in the episode, like, oh, you get to higher levels if you just let go and let it happen.
Yeah,
Let
it
it
plays
play
itself.
Yeah, well, I'm a gamer, and I can tell you that's not the game that takes over the world.
Right.
Like, you need to have we all know now with microtransactions that the way to truly get someone addicted is to have just enough skill that they feel like they're in control of it.
Yeah, if whatever the endorphin hit, once it wore off, it created like a craving for more. Then instead it would be like, I'm almost at level 47 through gritted teeth. Yeah. If everybody's
a lot of that.
blissed out, they just take it off and go to sleep or something.
And I mean, another of my questions is, the Ferengi need to get on this and institute microtransactions. How is this not their gig?
That would be great if we saw it in the background of DS9. It's been kind of neutered, you can only play 20 levels and then it shuts down.
Yeah.
Quark's got everybody playing it.
It does seem like a Ferengi style, or at least a Quark style plan, to capitalize on the kind of weakness and vices like that. But it's not really a vice because it's just making you feel good. But the sounds everybody makes are just so sexual.
Yes.
It's very uncomfortable when they walk in and Robin and Wesley are on the bed, sweaty, gasping.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot, and it's network television, but it's really one of the more sexual things you will ever see on early '90s network television. Before, like, Twin Peaks comes along.
But but in that great tradition of sci-fi, if it's something else though, so it's fine. Like that episode of the first season where the guys are they're junkies basically, like they need their hit of the medicine, and there's this great scene where they finally get this medicine and they're going to give it to the two guys, and they're both like, "Come on, man, come on!" And there's a slow pan into like Dr. Crusher's face, and she's like, "Oh my God, these guys are junkies." It's like, yeah, that's what the entire episode has been about. But yeah,
welcome to the episode.
Maybe you don't see that in the 24th century, but yeah, I see this guy lives on my corner.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't buy necessarily that there's no addiction, or I mean, Capture Cell White and all that, but like no addiction in this era. Like they're pretty far flung into the stars. Not every place is just really clean counters and calm men.
Well, do we? Yeah, right. We've seen in Discovery and in Picard, the kind of sort of seedier side of Federation life. Do you think? We've got this idea of the Federation as this perfect, Sunday school paradise. Do you think that was influenced by the fact that you can only get away with so much on TV? And now that we're seeing, the 25th century in Picard, it's getting a little dirtier because that's a good place maybe to take the Federation, but also because we can show that and say the F word and whatnot.
I mean, I think yes and no. We all know that Roddenberry had a whole mission statement about
that
back in the day. But I think that by the time you get to the late 80s, you can show a lot on TV. There's a lot of...
And they're syndicated, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pretty spicy stuff going on with, Dynasty, and I don't know, when was 21 Jump Street? Like, that was...
Around that time, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I don't necessarily think it's the case for Next Gen. And they do, even in Next Gen, try to push things a little past where Roddenberry felt that all the problems would be gone. I mean, the problem with Roddenberry's mission statement, as well nicely minded as it is it makes finding conflict for a serialized television show very difficult.
Yeah.
Because if people aren't having interpersonal conflict, which is another one of his précis, and if they're not having cultural conflict within their own culture, all that's left is intercultural conflict.
Yeah.
And that is rough to have hundreds of episodes that are self-contained with only a few conflict options. And I personally find, the big Romulan or Klingon episodes not as endearing or as rewatchable as episodes like this, which are self-contained and more about a specific sort of threat to characters. But yeah, I don't know. This was 1991, so Twin Peaks is going to start airing immediately after this, if not right before. And I talk about Twin Peaks a lot, but part of the reason for that is it's a real watershed moment in television, in terms of a television show that looked like a movie every week.
Yeah.
Serialized storytelling that took over the course of a season rather than an episode. And Kyle MacLachlan, who came from movies, so you have a big movie star coming into television. Hey, kids, that used to be really unusual. There did not used to be a pipeline that went that way.
Yeah. Well, Patrick Stewart was in Dune with Kyle MacLachlan.
He's British, so they're different rules.
Yeah.
It became Twin Peaks was a real change in what television could do, and so there really is kind of a before and after as far as it goes. And then after Twin Peaks ends, X-Files picks up almost immediately, and we enter 90s television.
Yeah, a whole new age.
It is a whole new age. So this episode, I feel like it goes for uncomfortable rather than gritty, which is what we're doing now with Discovery and Picard. So now we're into gritty science fiction, which is the trend now.
Yeah.
And are we doing that because we can show more on television? We can show more cheaply. A lot of these effects-heavy episodes, they would never have been able to do back in the day. That one of those episodes would have blown the whole season's budget.
Yeah.
But they're trying to do serialized storytelling instead of episodic storytelling, which is not necessarily a natural fit for Star Trek, and I know a lot of fans don't like it, but it's what it is right now.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get real far away from that Roddenberry mission statement, and I think that's part of why we haven't seen any post-Voyager Star Trek until Picard, because if you make a prequel, you don't have to have marry that idea that all sources of conflict are gone. You can have people acting the fool a little more. And if you put it post-Voyager, then you have to deal with all of that. Yeah. But Picard is post-Voyager. Well, it's not, sort of.
Well, it is. And something terrible happens to all the characters from the earlier shows.
Yeah, so it is post-Voyager.
Yeah.
Sort of not there's no big technological jump as between TOS and Next Gen, though.
That's something that let me down about Picard as well. I mean, there's certainly like a sweeping, like fun adventure story there, but this was our first view of the future, and
we sucked.
Yeah, and we see these glimpses because I wanted to see the Federation. And we see glimpses that give you kind of like tantalizing ideas about maybe where the Federation has gone in the intervening time, but they don't really unite into like a mission statement. You know what I mean? Like a thesis about what the future's like now. There are some kind of depressing dystopic ideas that we see, but they don't exactly build on the suggestions we got before from DS9 about maybe where the Federation was heading. They seem like afterthoughts. And so I hope that in a Picard season 2, we will be introduced to like the world at large in the Federation.
Well, everyone in the Federation seems like a huge dick.
They're Picard. All jerks.
They really. But to be fair, the admirals have always been.
Yeah,
that.
But even rank and file people are just like
Yeah, no, everyone just seems like kind of a jerk.
Yeah, they don't like their lives. I don't know.
No, I don't know. But I think that one thing we are seeing with Picard is so the Nobel effect. This is roundabout, but I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
The Nobel effect is that basically it's a lot harder to get a Nobel Prize these days than it used to be, because a lot of the sort of low-hanging fruit of science has been discovered and gotten prizes, and now the average age is much older because you have to go a lot further to get a discovery worthy of a Nobel Prize than you used to, and they are more incremental discoveries than they were back in the day. So I feel like there is a similar thing with science fiction in that there was a time when all you had to do was sort of take space travel even a little bit seriously, and it was revolutionary, and you would be showered in fans and awards forever. Yeah. And now things are a little more complicated, and we fans are a lot savvier than they used to be, because there's just so much more out there that people have seen by the time they ever come to your show or your book. And so with Picard, we're seeing that nobody is really interested in a planet just having one crop or one culture anymore, or the Federation being one thing and an entire empire of millions of people of another species being logical or passionate or just having one attribute. People aren't interested in that kind of science fiction in the same way anymore, because we've seen it, a lot of it, and now we want things that feel more realistic to us. So we have a lot of different star systems and individual cities or towns or star bases that have their own culture. And that makes the world building feel more real to an audience. Whereas in another time, the other approach made that audience feel more real and more invested. And so I think that we're kind of seeing that with Picard. We're seeing kind of a technology creep in storytelling, that we need to have things be a little more complex and I'm looking for a word and I'm not finding it here, kind of atomized. We want it down on the micro level rather than the macro level. We want to see the dirt on the streets, and we don't want to see the clean consoles anymore. And because fans are so savvy, they will ask 1,000 questions, and so it's a lot easier to pass off a culture as being citywide than planet-wide. And I think Firefly was a huge influence on Picard as well. Every time they land somewhere, it looks like it could be right out of Firefly.
Very dusty.
and so I just think that there is a lot has changed in televised science fiction between Next Gen and Picard, and they're really trying to sort of incorporate all of it. And so unfortunately, that makes it feel a little unfocused. And maybe they will pick just Firefly or just BSG or something in the second season to be a little more tonally consistent.
I can see fans getting frustrated or bored with the science fiction they've seen. It's the Federation citizens being bored with their amazing world that is stopping me up. Like, they were supposed to have fixed that. Do you know what I mean? We were supposed to be have dedicate our lives to bettering ourselves and others. And I'm not saying, it's your story. Do whatever you want. And also, how long can you keep 50 years of lotus eating going? But like, why is everybody a jerk? Do you know what I mean? Like, what has happened? Clearly, Mars is on fire. That's a problem. But, it has that optimism dimmed in their future. And if so, you can't just do that and then not explore it. Like, you have to get into that.
Well, do you think it has something? I mean, there's the whole thing with the destruction of Romulus. I feel like Star Trek can't get away right now from like wanting to have this 9/11 event all the time. It happened with the movies and San Francisco, and like, do you feel like it might have something to do with that, with them always wanting to have
it? Could. I think Picard is just a combination of the factors that they had. Like, it was a pantry meal. What do we have? And we've got Patrick Stewart, who God willing, he goes on forever, but we're going to.
But he can't run fast.
We got to make something now. Brent Spiner's in, and so we have to do this story. But what they end up doing is showing us all these tantalizing ideas about how the Federation will deal with honest to God, intelligent artificial life. What are they going to do with this? That's a story and a show in itself. They yada, yada, yada it. And then we end up 25 years later and there's no more synths because they've been banned. And it's like, no, I wanted to see the part before this. Like, what's that?
I get that. And part of it has got to be just that it's a lot fewer episodes.
There's
not room for episodes where you can just explore one idea in one corner of this world and illuminate that. But, as long as we're on Picard, I'm going to point out that Picard is Mass Effect, the television series.
You think so?
I don't know if you've played Mass Effect.
Oh, yes, of course, all of them.
But it is, which is weird because Mass Effect happened because they couldn't get the IP for Star Trek.
Yes, okay, yeah.
So the entire plot of Picard with the synths and everything, in fact, it's point-outable that they have never referred to artificial beings as synths until now, but that is what they call them in Mass Effect. it is the plot of the Mass Effect games.
The synths are the Geth. They've been like banned, and yeah.
But not just the Geth, all Edie and everything as
well.
Sure, and then the Reaper comes in at the end. Like it's
literally tentacles from outside the galaxy.
Literally a Reaper.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And the whole thing about the AI can call for a big, like, it's all Mass Effect. It is
constructing a beacon to
Yep. It's very strangely Mass Effect-y. And so I think that they probably just had too many influences going on, and then somebody was binge playing Mass Effect right before they got hired for this.
Right.
Like, that's my theory, because it's just too similar.
I like the idea that Akiva Goldsman is he's wrapping up, Mass Effect 3. Oh, I got a writer's meeting. And Patrick Stewart's not a gamer. So he's like, okay, there's octopuses that live outside the galaxy. Listen to me. Listen. Yeah.
If I have a disappointment with Picard, other than that, that the middle just really sags, is that it's just it's not enough itself. It's so many other shows of the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And little bits and pieces of them taken apart and reassembled into something that's cool and affecting, but doesn't feel like its own thing yet.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that way in the way that Discovery, for some of the faults that it has, felt different to me. Felt like its own world. They were doing their own thing. Yeah. It's the DLC of shows.
Yeah, no, it is. It absolutely is a DLC.
Yeah.
And, it's season 1. When has there ever been?
There's never been a, yeah.
I mean, ironically, Discovery probably does have the best season 1 of any
it's pretty good.
Star Trek.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how many seasons are we going to get of Picard? So if we only end up with 2, this is half. So,
right. Yeah.
But at least we got a lot of 7 in there. That was nice.
Yeah.
She got to not wear a cat suit. That's good for her.
I
feel good for her. She got to wear like pants.
And I think I've been watching Voyager doing the whole series, and I noticed.
I have too. I just binged the whole series.
Yeah. I noticed that, like, every time, because especially later on, they definitely give her a chance to wear regular clothes, but you can see under those clothes, she's still wearing the corset.
Pretty sure she's still wearing
and
it.
It's just like, what? Why did you let your agent agree to that in the contract? But yeah, it's nice to see her in just regular clothes.
Yeah. So there's good stuff about Picard, and I think the first episode is just spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes weird. So I don't know, but back to the game.
Yeah.
I do think it is a really good episode. Although it is strange how they show, I guess Wesley had sex. Eesh.
Is that what you got out of that?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Because she talks about his birthmark.
Yeah, I thought that they built enough plausible deniability in that, because he mentions that it's a rumor.
He doesn't have a birthmark on his face, man.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he does say who started that rumor about the birthmark. So if you were too scandalized by the idea of Wesley Crusher getting it on, I think you could believe that it was all.
They definitely banged. Like, they're in his quarters talking about his birthmark.
They are, and they are very intimate with each other.
They're very,
a post-bang level of intimacy.
I don't believe that Wesley Crusher has ever had enough cool in his body to be able to, like, lightly kiss a girl on a cheek he hasn't already had sex with. Like,
yeah, right.
But he's not that guy. He's not Riker.
I can see it.
So it is a sort of strange seg at the end. But this is a very moralistic episode.
Oh yeah,
And I feel like the universe we're in with Star Trek now is a very amoralistic universe.
Yeah.
We don't I can't imagine them making an episode like this now. Not only because they wouldn't want to offend gamers, who is Star Trek's bread and butter these days, but just because a heavy-handed moral like this, I don't think flies with the modern audience. We don't really want to be preached at, and I think people would just be entirely put off by it. But I think the idea of an addictive game probably would make it into a modern Trek episode. It just wouldn't end like this.
And the way that Trek is navigating that jump between just staunch morality to amorality, but also just having the freedom to tell whatever kind of story, is kind of the problem. Like the Trek franchise is a 50-year-old teenager who has discovered a few swear words, and is now just acting
they're
out.
so happy they can swear.
Yeah. And I think that will settle down as the franchise continues and they find some new synthesis of being able to have this universe that's supposed to be idealistic, but also, be able to show, because even on TNG, they'd always go into like a Star Wars cantina and there'd be some lady with like four hands playing the piano and they were trying to be kind of gritty and sleazy, but not really pulling it off. They've wanted to do that for a while.
They have, and I mean, it's always sad to see like the '90s drywall sets that they want to make dirty and cool, but they're like, it just never. You can always see the plastic underneath it, but yeah, like it's I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the Pike series is like.
Yeah,
because that's the one that has the potential to be most like classic Trek. So I feel like that'll be the.
They could push all of that. Brave American spaceman stuff into that show.
Yes,
but
they can.
I have a sneaking suspicion that it'll be
so.
very Discovery-esque.
I think that they need to make it more episodic, but they are going to have
Oh, they're definitely going to do that because the fans are just screaming for it.
But they have to deal with the colonialism of Star Trek because that's not fun for people anymore.
You're saying whereas like Kirk did it and didn't think twice about it, they'll be doing that type of stuff, but then also reflecting on that type of stuff.
Well, yeah, Kirk did it and didn't think twice about it. Picard did it, but he felt bad about it.
Yeah.
Janeway, it was a whole different situation.
Hey, they were under. There's a lot of stress.
It's a whole other you can't really put it on the same. And I think the next step is probably maybe don't do it.
Yeah, well.
But it's in the past, so how is that going to come out? Yeah. I don't know. But I do know that a contemporary audience is not just going to want to watch like Pike bang space ladies through the universe and like ruin indigenous cultures. Like that's not what's going to happen in that show.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see what does happen if it stays with the kind of gritty things aren't that cool attitude, or if the optimistic Star Trek gets its own series.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we talk weird stuff about this episode? We were talking about things being gritty and not quite as idealistic in Star Trek, but this, of course, was written by Susan Sackett, who revealed in a memoir that she was not only the assistant of Roddenberry, but his longtime lover for pretty much most of the time that they were together. Yeah. And it's ironic and sad that he died, the week before this came out.
Yeah.
And she was fired by Majel Barrett that week. So she's got an episode on TV and she's out of a job. And of course, I mean, we didn't even touch on the sexism that you find in the games industry, but sexism
it's been a harrowing couple months for that.
Sexism and racism is, of course, they're limiting factors for women and minorities in Hollywood. And there's an anecdote about how Brandon Braga was like hitting on Ashley Judd on set for the entire episode. And so people go, well, why didn't we get more Robin Lefler? She would have been great. She probably had wanted nothing to do with the show. And luckily she went on to stardom in Hollywood, but also we know now
that she had a really bad time. Oh, and of course Braga and Jerry Ryan is look
I didn't know being a producer was like your dating service. I didn't know that.
Apparently it is.
But that's true for a lot of people.
I've been that way in Hollywood for a really long time. I've never understood why in the arts there's just no rules. Like you don't have to treat people well because it's art. Like that doesn't seem to follow the other to me, but it is that way.
And the argument is but we've both got experience acting. Like the idea is that, if you don't want this part, there's thousands of people out there. But at the same time, you looked at thousands of people for this part and I was the right one. So which is it? Am I a rare resource or not?
Yeah, no, it's all pretty messed up. And, I wouldn't be uninterested in seeing a Star Trek episode that dealt with that kind of thing. Cause I'm not sure I buy that goes away when you have replicators and starships either. Especially given how Riker treats literally everyone,
Well,
and Kirk too.
Maybe in a couple years, because CBS Trek seems to really be pushing against that trend in their casting and writing. I think that's great. And then there's the former CEO of CBS, Les Moonves. So it's just it's persistent and everywhere.
No, it's everywhere, and it's not just Hollywood. It's gaming industry, it's publishing, it's everywhere. Yeah. This is not specific or unique to any one field. What is specific and unique to the arts, to gaming, to publishing, to movies, to that kind of thing, is that we're all independent contractors and we don't have HR.
Yeah.
There's nobody to help us. There's the union, but they've been unhelpful in the past in Hollywood, and a lot of other people don't have one. So that's part of why this happens, because there are shadows that allow it to happen, shadowy places where it can happen, because there's no large group advocating for anyone, and there's no hierarchical structure to deal with it. So that's why it happens. And it shouldn't, but I don't have a lot of hope for it ending anytime soon. And God, how old was Ashley Judd when she filmed this episode? She doesn't look very old.
Pretty young.
Yeah, and still can't escape it. And of course, even just writing an episode where you've got this really cool female character whose job is basically to, bang Wesley, solve the mystery, and move on.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a choice, but it sucks, because she is a character that, she wasn't in an overly sexualized outfit except for the weird orange jumpsuit for 5 minutes. And she wasn't treated like a bimbo. She wasn't, made fun of at any point. She wasn't, her competence was never questioned.
Yeah.
She is a very modern character. And I think that's why a lot of young girls like me watching it really liked her, because she's not the butt of anyone's joke. And Troy and Crusher often are, sadly enough, despite, being capable bridge officers. They still are.
Yeah. So maybe the real Wesley Crusher was Robin Lefler all along.
Maybe it was. I would watch Robin Lefler Adventures.
Yeah. And of course, she goes out. The tie-in authors pick up on her, and she has a life in the books too. Yeah.
Oh, because the whole rules thing that she has is a gift for any writer.
Oh yeah,
and
you can do whatever you want.
List or rules like that is such a great. It's a great tool that we all use and probably overuse.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's awesome, and of course this never comes up again. Even though, how cool! I would love to see one of these headsets in the background of a Picard.
Oh yeah,
in one of those sleazy bars.
They never, that. They don't really do sequels on Trek except for, Q, I suppose. But I just thought it'd be great if, there was one neglected headset, in the cargo bay of the bottom of the ship or something like that. And Molly or somebody gets their hands on it, and then, they become mind controlled and somehow spread it to somewhere else. And
again, how does the mind, it said so the mind, I feel like the mind control is not very well explained within the episode. When I looked at the, alpha afterwards, it said that it just makes them open to suggestion. But Picard at the end is like, oh, we could introduce it to Starfleet Academy. So he's actually taking the initiative in this plan. He had a
employee of the month. Yeah.
So this seems to be an incredibly effective brainwashing technique. I don't really understand how it can communicate the higher plan here and then have people be all in without being zombie-like and be able to take the initiative on their own. It is some really good programming, EA games.
Yeah, you could take it into a comic book or something and have, because Itana Joel is even this is a pretty good idea. But what if they're committed to the cause but not the leader necessarily? So they get rid of Itana Joel, and then now there's just this hierarchy of people who are ostensibly mind controlled, but they've got their own plans going on.
And what is the ultimate plan to take over the Federation and what?
I guess it's
Itana Joel is going to be president.
Nominally it's a Qatarian plot, but it reminds me of the plot with the little bugs that get inside of them.
Just thinking that,
Conspiracy.
I don't get it. But fortunately, it can be cured by some flashing lights, and you will never encounter flashing lights in space.
It can be cured by a seizure. Yeah.
Other than through Data's little palm beacon, because flashlights.
That was a sweet scene, though.
I wish they'd at least said it had to be a specific sequence or something, though, because lights flash all the time in space. This has now become a very bad plan.
Yeah, they do,
because it's just some flashing lights in the dark. Look, some people's alarm clocks are like that.
Yeah, he does that cool thing, and we get that for the bridge crew. But then he just says, "Oh, I also programmed all the screens in the ship to do the same thing. So don't worry about it. Everybody's fine."
So it's cool. Yeah.
Well, we should probably bring it into the station here.
Okay.
But thank you for joining me. I was going to ask you, on the last show, you said that Captain Picard was your space dad in this instance. He was your favorite captain. And we see him in this episode, of course, as you mentioned, be the employee of the month. Very good little drone. And using his ingenuity to forward the plan. Who do you think amongst the other Star Trek captains would have been the next best person to handle this problem?
Oh my God, Kirk would have he would have passed it to the entire universe. Riker doesn't have any game. Kirk has game. Kirk could have gotten anyone to play this thing. No problem.
Yeah.
If we're spreading this weird sex game across the universe, Kirk is your guy.
Yeah.
That is your number one dial. Kirk's the DoorDash of the Enigma game. Round and round the universe it goes.
But when the time comes, for that point in the episode, he would just shake it off. He'd just go, no, and then he'd be himself again.
Yeah.
No lights needed.
No, the twist is that Kirk is not different when addicted to the
He's
game.
just the same person.
He's just the same person.
Is it working? Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
No, it's definitely Kirk. I don't even think Janeway would give this thing the time of day. She'd punt it out an airlock.
If you told her that, if there was a sexy Irish guy in there,
but then she'd see right away there wasn't, and
or if it was Nintendogs, because she misses her dog, and it's you could play with dogs in this video game. Maybe she'd go after that.
Yeah.
Now that we've reached the end of the show, and for your past appearance on the show, you will receive a promotion to Lieutenant Junior grade. Now, the last time on the show, you said that you worked in the command division, and I believe specifically with negotiations. How's that going?
Yeah, well, it's all right. It's gotten a lot better since this game showed up.
Yeah, everybody's more pliable,
they don't really have to negotiate
open to
that much
suggestion.
anymore. They come up with their own ideas.
Oh, Section 31 gets their hands on the technology and they want to use it.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. All right, we got to cut that part out. I'm going to write a novel on that. Well, Lieutenant Valente, thanks for joining me to talk about Star Trek and the Star Trek universe. If people want to continue the conversation, and they can, at EISTPod on Twitter and the Enterprising Individuals Facebook page, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valente and on Patreon at Cat Valente.
That's great.
And my website is CatherynneMValente.com.
And people should be looking for the space opera sequel in the future?
Late 2021, early 2022.
Okay, great. And I know that you've been working on a big thing. I don't suppose you can say anything about that.
I've been working on a couple of big things that are secret, so I don't know which one you mean, but I'm going to say yes.
Any old big thing.
I can't talk about it yet.
Okay, well, we'll be looking forward to whatever that's going to be.
Hopefully soon. I have reason to believe, if it's what I think you're talking about, it probably is, given the last time we talked. I have reason to believe that I will be able to announce it in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, well, we're waiting for that with bated breath. Thanks again for joining me.
All right, thank you so much.
We're signing off until the next mission. Hailing frequencies closed.
I'm Mikan Hana.
And I'm Caliban.
And we're the hosts of the Sailor Noob podcast. I'm the expert.
And I'm the noob.
You're talking into the wrong end of the microphone.
Aye, aye.
Okay, every week we watch a new episode of Sailor Moon and learn about monsters, fashion, food, culture, and of course, the sailor warrior of love and justice, Sailor Moon.
All right, now, what is her rank? Is she an admiral or a rear admiral?
Okay, shh. The ad's almost over. We're a couple of magical people, and every week we Moon Prism Power make up a new episode.
Better amidships. Steady as she goes.
Please stop that. Sailor Noob is available every Friday on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Shiver me timbers.